Hi, my name is Cameron Lee Truelove, and this is my social movement, Expropriate the Wealth. So today the topic that I want to go over is How Democracy Works, United States Edition. Don't worry, I'll do a Canadian one later. I chose this one today. I don't know, I was completely arbitrary. So if I move my head just slightly over here, you notice in the top corner here, if you can even get close to reading that, it says simplified. So how democracy works, USA edition, simplified, because it is much more complicated than this, which it should be. But today I'm going to go over how it works for us, not necessarily how the entire system works in its entirety. So bear with me. So where does democracy officially begin? It officially begins at you, or me, or whoever the hell, the voter. So the voter is exemplified here by this little man that's waving. Hey, I vote. If you don't vote, you're actually not even kind of a part of democracy unless you figure out some other sneaky way of getting in there, like perhaps you're super rich. In any case, the voter elects three different types of people: municipal, state, and federal. So a good example of like municipal would be like the mayor. A good example of state would be the governor, and then you vote for representatives. And each state gets 2 senators, and they each serve like 6-year terms intermittently, so like every 3 years you gotta get a new senator and you gotta throw a senator out. So once our little man here, let's call him Theodore, once he votes, he then passes the torch of democracy over to our elected officials, whose job it is to represent us in government. So our governments and representatives, their job is to pass bills. Now, a bill is something that once it goes through the legislative process, it can eventually become a law. The people that are allowed to introduce bills or write bills, they encompass a wide variety of people, and that includes, but not limited to, the executive branch of government, the state legislation, so that'd be like your governors, the people, so this would be Theodore's literally only chance to involve himself more in the democratic process, and he would usually do so as like more of a special interest group than anything. Although I think you can actually go out and try to pass a bill by yourself, I just don't know how successful it would be. And then you have your district representative, who you've elected to represent you in your district. And then in this little blue circle here with the star, I have the lobbyist. And we'll get more into him a bit later. So the one thing a bill needs to do before it gets anywhere near being passed as law is it needs to go through what I like to call committee work. And this requires a justification report. Why the hell are we doing this? And then a bunch of meetings, hearings, markups, like in case anyone doesn't like anything, they'll redline it. And then a reading and a vote. And that's just to get into the debate and amendment stage. So once we get into the debate and amendment stage of passing a bill, we have to have at least 100 people in Congress there, because otherwise it's invalidated. So they need to show up to fucking work. And then they make amendments to things they don't like. They have readings so everyone's on the same page again. And then they vote on it. And so it can either pass or fail. This is called the House action. So after the House action and they've passed the bill through the Congress stage, it then goes to what I like to call the budget stage. And this is where they're like, can we even pay for this shit? So for example, if someone was to say, we should get every American man, woman, child, and cat $1 million, the budget assembly would be like, eat a dick. It's not possible, right? So how are we going to pay for it? So the next stage of passing a bill would be committee work 2. Which is, I like to call it same shit, different day. It's similar to committee work 1, but that would be like the first draft. Committee work 2 is like the second draft, and that's where they're like, are we getting anywhere with this? It might actually get tabled. It might be left for another time. They might just say fuck. So in the event that the committee doesn't say fuck it, and it passes, they get it calendared, which means they basically set a day that they're going to bring this shit up. So our next stage is a fairly important one. It hits the Senate, and we go into what I like to call debate and amendments, stage 2. This is where shit gets fucking real. This bill has now passed through Congress. It has passed the committee stages. They have suggested amendments to it, and this is where the Senate gets a chance to make amendments to it. They're like, you know what? Congress is fucked. We're going to have to change some shit in here because this is messed up. So they call it up one day. They're like, hey, we calendared this shit. We got to talk about it, right? And then they have like action and debate. So like they fucking just talk about it. It's a big old meeting about the bill. They decide on things regarding it. They read it so everyone knows what the hell is actually the bill is about, and then they vote on it. Now the problem here is that this is a very simplified arc, but it's actually much more complicated than that. It shoots back and forth between Congress and committees and whatever, and it gets adjusted a variety of times so that it's perfect. So should that a bill pass the Senate action, so they've passed it, it moves on to what's called enrollment, which is far more complicated than this tiny little line here would imply. After enrollment, it goes straight to the President of the United States of America, where he has the final approval of whether the bill. So he can reject it, he can approve it, he can even veto it if he wants to. But if he doesn't veto it, it is law now. So let's use an example. Let's say the bill was a stimulus package to say, I don't know, deal with COVID-19. Now, they suggested, let's give Theodore over here $1,200. And Theodore's like, hey, yeah, I could use $1,200. And then they also like, well, corporations and banks and the stock market need money too. Let's give them $4 trillion. Now, that plan, as you know, maybe let's call it slightly unfair, has passed through your elected officials, budgeting, committee work, and then also the Senate. So everyone's been like, cool, then the president's like, fuck yeah, do it, it's all good. It's a lot. So at this stage in the video, you might be asking me, why are you telling me this? That's if you're even still watching. I didn't want a lesson on fucking how democracy works. I just assumed it did. Well, I'm gonna unfortunately tell you that it's kind of sketchy. Alright, so let's go back to what I like to call where things get a bit hairy. So over here, right in the bill part of it, you're like, okay, well that all sounded well and good, Cam. The only issue is that there's a lot of corruption in democracy. So like the executive branch of government might be seduced by money. The state might be seduced by money. The people, probably not as much, but who knows? There might be money there. Representative state, there might be money interests there, and lobbyists are just basically a whole bunch of money to government. And it gets much worse. So in the committee stage, you might be asking like, well, wouldn't they work out whether or not it's supposed to, maybe the committee's corrupt as fuck. So, more money, more corruption there. And then it goes through debate and amendments. So someone might be like, we should have given Theodore perhaps $4,000. You know what I mean? Him and his family are going to be struggling. $1,200 doesn't get you anywhere. And then someone in Congress is like, fuck that. I need to give another $1 trillion to like this sector of the economy or that. So you get even more money involved into that stage of things. Plus the lobbyists might be lobbying Congress. Then you go into the budget. Like, can we pay for this? Like, well, it has to pass that stage. But also, there might be like, well, what can we afford? There could be outside external entities trying to adjust that part of the whole process too. So you got corruption at that stage. Then you have the committee who's like now been like dealing with all these things, and they might be involved in some sort of bribery. And you're probably like, Cam, how can someone just bribe our elected officials? Well, they can, and they do it all the time. So literally, when you get to the Senate state of it, senators are just old rich dudes for the most part, and a lot of them might be very corrupt as fuck. So you have money interests dealing with fucking democracy down there. So everything, by the time it goes through all these stages and gets all the way to the president, who may or may not be corrupt depending on how much nice of a guy he is, but also he might be influenced by money as well. So you got Theodore over here who doesn't really have much money. He's just got a little bit of money in his pocket. And then you have these people who have fucking shit piles of money. And then you have the committee, who are part of like the 1% for the most part. They have shit tons of money. And then the people like lobbyists involved in this stage have a ton of money. And the fucking finance people have money. And then the committee also still has money. And then the senators usually have fucking tons of money as well. And then the president, fuck, he's got to be goddamn rich, because how else would he become the president? So, if you're asking me, how does democracy work? It doesn't. So you might also say to me, but Cam, I'm allowed to vote. Well, you're right, you are allowed to vote, and that is a big part of democracy. But where does democracy end? Right there. You vote, and then big money tends to influence literally everything else. Who does this big money come from? Private interest, big corporations, multinational corporations, big banks, central banks. There's so much fucking money involved in decision making in politics, and because these motherfuckers need to get elected. They can't get elected without money. So they have to pretty much, it's like forced corruption. It's like, hey, we'll give you all this money, but we want you to do shit for us. And then they're like, yeah, okay. So the depressing point that I am trying to make with all this is that our democracy is broken and is overly influenced by big money. And we need to fix it. And that's what Expropriate the Wealth is very much about. We don't just want to expropriate 50% of the wealth in a one-time payment. We need to actually improve democracy. And it's not until we improve democracy that we even have a hope in hell of expropriating the wealth. So what's really important for you to take out of this is that we need to change this system, and we'll talk about that in another video. And if you guys really like my video, if you could just click the link and subscribe and maybe check out some of my social media sites. I post a lot of memes, and some of them are funny, and some of them will probably make you extremely mad at me. But you'll never know unless you check it out. So check out the link and all the other stuff that I'm going to make pop up on here. And believe it or not, I've been using a cat toy as a pointer because I lost my stick of expropriation. But it will be back. I will find it. And I hope all of you guys are staying safe and clean.